Hi, I'm Ryan Baker and this is Big Day in Education. Today we're going to wrap up week 2 of Big Day in Education with a discussion of types of validity. There are a bunch of types of validity. Generalizability is a topic that's sometimes seen as validity, sometimes seen as not. But it basically is, and we talked about this last time, does your model remain predictive when using a new data set? This underlies the cross-validation paradigm that is common in data mining and just great. Knowing the context your model will be used in drives which kind of generalization we should study. Let's talk about a generalizability fail. Let's say you build a model of boredom on data from 3 students, and the model fails when applied to new students.
A special case of this is detector rot. In some cases, a detector can generalize well initially, but the underlying circumstances change over time. For example, the schools or students might use the learning platform differently over time, say for 30 minutes in class rather than 50 minutes at a time. Or the learning platform might change subtly in ways that nobody really thinks is going to be a problem. Or perhaps the societal conditions change. For example, a lot of school at-risk detection broke during the COVID pandemic. And this can change the meaning of variables or their relationships so that the detector no longer works, which Levin et al. Called detector rot.
Ecological validity. Do your findings apply to real-life situations outside of research settings? Kind of important if you want to make a difference in the world, as opposed to making a difference in research settings. For example, if you build a detector of student behavior in lab settings, is it going to work in real classrooms? Let's talk about ecological validity fail. Let's say you build a detector of off-task behavior using data from a lab study where students use the software one at a time. And then you apply it to classroom data where students go off task in a completely different way. In the lab setting, they were just kind of getting bored, kind of looking into space, maybe looking at their cell phones. But in the class, they're talking to their neighbors about One Direction or whatever the top boy band is today. In that case, your model might genuinely not work. Here's a subtle fail. Let's say you build a model predicting high school dropout on data from 300 students, all from middle-class suburban schools that were easy to do research on. And then you cross-validate the model at the student level and you get your paper into the Educational Data Mining or Learning Analytics Conference. Success. But your model fails when applied to urban students or rural students. This could be a real problem, especially because often suburban kids are easier to get access to than urban kids, and urban kids are easier to get access to than rural kids. This can be a real problem for research. Construct validity. Does your model actually measure what it was intended to measure? One interpretation is, does your model fit the training data? Because hey, the training data is the construct you want to measure, right? It's your ground truth. And that's probably good enough, as long as you can trust your training data. A fail in terms of that would be, you're trying to detect from disciplinary records which kids are going to end up in alternative school. But your label of alternative school also includes students with cognitive or developmental disabilities sent to a special school. Might not be the same population you're thinking of when you think of alternative school. Predictive validity. Does your model predict not just the present, but the future as well? As the famous physicist Niels Bohr said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. Substantive validity. Do your results matter? Are you modeling a construct that actually matters? If you model X, what kind of scientific findings or impact on practice is this model actually going to drive? This can be demonstrated by predicting future things that we all agree matter.
For example, we know that boredom correlates strongly with a lot of things: disengagement, learning outcomes, standardized exam scores, and even attending college years later.
By comparison, whether someone prefers visual or verbal learning materials doesn't even seem to predict very reliably whether they learn better from visual or verbal learning materials. So maybe this is not something that we consider to have high substantive validity at the moment. Content validity. From testing, does the test cover the full domain it's meant to cover? For behavior modeling, an analogy would be, does the model cover the full range of behavior it's intended to? Let's take, for example, gaming a system, trying to subvert the software to get through without learning the material. A model of gaming the system that only captured one form of gaming the system, say systematic guessing, and didn't capture hint abuse, I don't know who would have done that, me, in 2004, that model doesn't have complete content validity compared to a model that captures both. Conclusion validity. Are your conclusions justified based on the evidence? So to sum up, there's many dimensions of validity, and it's important to address them all for a model that you can really consider valid.
That concludes our discussion of validity. Next up, algorithmic bias.